Ambassador Crystal stood before the massive viewing screen in the High Council chamber, his four arms crossed in what humans would call a defensive posture. The image before him showed three human warships burning through space toward the distant Velthari homeworld. They were small ships by galactic standards, almost laughably so. "They cannot be serious," said Counselor Methvin, her crystalline body catching the light as she moved closer to the screen. "Three ships, against the entire Dominion fleet." Crystal did not answer immediately. He was remembering a conversation from many cycles ago. A human diplomat named Sarah Chen had sat across from him in this very chamber. She had smiled when she offered the alliance treaty. Such a strange expression, that smile, so many teeth showing. "We do not make these offers lightly," she had said. "When humanity offers friendship, we mean it, forever." He had thought it was just diplomatic language, pretty words to seal a trade agreement. The Velthari Collective had accepted the terms because humans made excellent trading partners. They were creative and hardworking. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards, but they had interesting ideas about medicine and agriculture. That was 50 standard years ago. Sarah Chen was long dead now. Humans lived such brief lives compared to the Velthari, who could survive for thousands of years. Crystal had assumed the alliance would fade with her generation. That was how things worked in the galaxy. Empires rose and fell. Alliances shifted like sand in the wind. Nothing lasted forever. "Ambassador," said Methvin, "should we not tell them to turn back? The Cathari Dominion has 700 warships. These humans are flying to their deaths." Crystal watched the three small ships on the screen. They were not slowing down. "I already contacted them," he said quietly. "I explained the situation. I told them we would understand if they chose not to honor the treaty. 50 years is a long time. Many of their leaders were not even born when we signed it." "And what did they say?" Crystal's secondary hands twitched, a sign of deep emotion among his people. "Their admiral said, 'Ambassador, with respect, you do not seem to understand how this works. You are our allies. The Cathari attacked your colony. We are coming.'" The council chamber fell silent. On the screen, the three human ships continued their journey. Sensors showed them entering the outer edge of the Cathari system. "This is foolish," said another counselor, his voice carrying the bitter edge of someone who had seen too many wars. "Three ships cannot make a difference. The humans are throwing away lives for nothing, for words on paper signed by people who are now dust." Crystal turned to face the council. "I think," he said slowly, "that we have misunderstood something important about humans." Before anyone could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the station. A technician rushed to the main console, her fingers dancing across the controls. Her face went pale. "Ambassador," she said, "we are detecting additional contacts, many additional contacts, emerging from fold space at the edge of the system." The viewing screen shifted to show the new arrivals. Felt his heart stop. Ships, human ships, not 3, not 30. Hundreds of them poured out of fold space like water from a broken dam. Destroyers and cruisers and carriers so large they blotted out the stars behind them. The sensor officer was reading out numbers, but her voice had become a whisper. 412 contacts. No, wait, more are arriving. 500, 600. They are still coming, Ambassador. Stared at the screen. He had studied human military capabilities. He knew they had a fleet. But this was something else entirely. "The three ships," he said, "the ones we saw first, what were they?" The technician checked her readings. "Scouts, sir. They were advanced scouts, clearing the path and confirming enemy positions." The humans had not sent 3 ships to die heroically. They had sent 3 ships to prepare for the arrival of their entire battle fleet. Every major warship humanity possessed was now entering the Cathari system. A communication came through, accepted it with trembling hands. A human face appeared on screen. She was old, with gray hair and lines around her eyes. She wore an admiral's uniform covered in medals. "Ambassador Crystal," she said, "I am Admiral Rodriguez, commanding officer of the Terran Combined Fleet. We received word that the Cathari Dominion attacked your colony on Velthari Minor. We are here to address that." Admiral Crystal managed to say, "This is unexpected. We did not ask for." "You did not need to ask." The Admiral's voice was calm but firm. "You are our allies. Article 7 of the Treaty of Cooperation states that an attack on any allied territory will be treated as an attack on Earth itself. The Cathari killed 40,000 of your citizens. That is 40,000 too many. But the treaty was signed 50 years ago. Surely you cannot be bound by." Admiral Rodriguez leaned forward. Her eyes were hard as stone. "Ambassador, let me explain something about humanity. When we make a promise, we keep it. When we sign a treaty, we honor it. When we call someone friend, we mean it. Not for a year, not for a generation, forever. The treaty your people signed with us will be honored as long as there is a human being left alive to honor it. That is not negotiable. That is not optional. That is simply who we are." On the tactical display, the massive Cathari fleet was beginning to move. 700 warships arranged in a defensive formation. They outnumbered the humans. They had larger ships, better weapons, supposedly. But Crystal noticed something strange. The Cathari were not advancing. They were pulling back, retreating toward their homeworld. "Why?" He looked at the human fleet again. Something about those ships was wrong. They did not look like normal warships. They were covered in scars and patches, signs of many battles, many victories. These were not parade ships built to look impressive. These were the real thing, working warships that had fought and won countless engagements across human space and beyond. Every ship in that fleet had killed before. And the Cathari knew it. "Admiral," said Crystal, "what do you intend to do?" Rodriguez smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "First, we are going to destroy their fleet. Then we are going to occupy their territory. Then we are going to make them understand that attacking our friends was the worst mistake they ever made. And then, Ambassador, we are going to come home, because that is what allies do." The first missiles launched from the human fleet. On the screen, they looked like a swarm of angry insects racing toward the enemy. The battle for the Cathari system had begun. Crystal watched in silence. Behind him, the council members stood frozen. None of them had ever seen anything like this. No one in the galaxy had ever seen anything like this. Because no one in the galaxy had ever truly understood what it meant to be humanity's friend. The Battle of Cathari Prime lasted 6 hours. Military analysts across the galaxy would study it for centuries afterward, trying to understand what had happened and why. The Cathari Dominion had possessed every advantage: more ships, better positioning, home territory, superior numbers. They lost everything. Crystal watched from the viewing screen as human destroyers tore through the Dominion fleet like predators through a school of fish. The Cathari ships were larger, yes, but they were slow, built for intimidation rather than combat. Human ships danced around them, striking from unexpected angles, coordinating attacks with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. "How are they doing this?" whispered Methvin. Her crystalline form flickered with colors that indicated deep confusion. "Our tactical simulations showed this should be impossible." A young technician looked up from her console. "The human ships are sharing targeting data in real time. Every vessel in their fleet knows exactly what every other vessel is doing. They fight like they have one mind controlling them all." "That is impossible," said Counselor Methvin. "No communication system is fast enough for that level of coordination." "Theirs is," said the technician simply. Crystal said nothing. He was remembering another conversation with Sarah Chen long ago. They had been discussing human history, and she had mentioned something called the Second World War. "Millions died," she had said. Entire cities burned. We almost destroyed ourselves, but we learned from it. We learned that war is not a game. It is not about glory or honor or proving how strong you are. It is about one thing only, winning. And we got very, very good at it. He had not understood then. He understood now. On the screen, a Cathari dreadnought exploded. It was the flagship of their fleet, carrying their commanding admiral. 3 human cruisers had caught it in a crossfire. The dreadnought had tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. Human ships blocked every escape route. "The Cathari fleet is breaking formation," reported the sensor officer. "They are surrendering. No, they are trying to flee, scattering in all directions." "Let them run," said Admiral Rodriguez's voice over the communication channel. She had kept an open line to the Velthari station throughout the battle. "Mark the ones that flee. We will deal with them later. Focus on any ship still fighting." 20 minutes later, it was over. The great Cathari Dominion fleet, pride of their empire for 300 years, had ceased to exist. Some ships had escaped. Most had not. Crixtal counted the remains on the tactical display. Over 400 Cathari vessels destroyed. Human losses numbered 17 ships. "This is not possible," said Methvin for the 3rd time. "The numbers do not make sense." But the numbers were right there on the screen. 17 human ships lost, 412 Cathari ships destroyed. The math was simple. The implications were terrifying. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the main screen again. There was no joy in her expression, no celebration. She looked tired. "Ambassador Crixtal," she said, "the immediate threat has been dealt with. We will now proceed to Cathari Prime to accept their surrender. I would like you to be present for the ceremony." Me, Crixtal was surprised. "Why?" "Because this war was fought for your people. The Velthari should be there when it ends. It is only right." Considered this. In his experience, victors did not share their glory. They kept it for themselves. They used it to build power and influence. "Admiral, I do not understand. You have won a great victory. Why involve us?" Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Ambassador, I was a little girl when the Treaty of Cooperation was signed. My grandmother told me about it. She said it was an important day. The first time humanity made real friends among the stars. She was proud of that. She said friendship was the most valuable thing in the universe, and we should never take it for granted." The Admiral paused. "My grandmother died 30 years ago, but I remember what she said. And I know she would want me to do this right. The Velthari are our friends. This victory belongs to both of us. That is how friendship works." Felt something shift inside him. In 400 years of life, he had dealt with many species. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched alliances form and crumble. He had learned to trust no one and expect the worst from everyone. But this was different. This was something he had never encountered before. "I will come," he said. "Thank you, Admiral." Rodriguez nodded. "I will send a shuttle. We leave in 2 hours." The screen went dark. Crixtal turned to face his council. They were all staring at him. "What just happened?" asked Methvin. "I am not sure," Crixtal admitted, "but I think we may have underestimated humanity." 2 hours later, Crixtal stood on the bridge of the human flagship, a massive carrier called the Eternal Promise. The name had seemed strange to him at first. Now he thought he understood it. The ship was alive with activity. Human crew members rushed back and forth, repairing damage, tending to the wounded, preparing for the next phase of operations. They moved with purpose and efficiency. No wasted motion. No confusion. "Ambassador," said Admiral Rodriguez, appearing at his side, "we are approaching Cathari Prime. Their government has requested terms." "What terms will you offer?" The Admiral handed him a data tablet, read through it slowly. His eyes widened. "This is very generous." "Is it?" Rodriguez shrugged. "We are not here to destroy them. We are here to make sure they never attack our friends again. These terms accomplish that. The terms required the Cathari to pay reparations to the Velthari for the colony attack. They would reduce their fleet to a defensive force only. They would allow human observers at all their military installations, and they would sign a non-aggression pact with the Velthari that would last for 1,000 years. But there was no demand for territory, no call for revenge, no attempt to humiliate or crush the Cathari people. In my experience, said Crixtal, victors in war demand much more than this. We are not here for conquest, said Rodriguez. We are here for justice. The Cathari attacked your colony. They killed innocent people. They will pay for that, but we will not become monsters in the process. That is not who we are. Set down the data tablet. Admiral, may I ask you something? Of course. Why, truly, why did you come? The treaty is 50 years old. Humans live such short lives. Most of your people never even met a Velthari. Why fight and die for strangers? Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. She walked to the viewing port and looked out at the stars. My grandfather served on the first ship that contacted your people, she said finally. He was a young officer then. He told me stories about it, about how frightened everyone was. Humanity was so new to space travel, so alone. And then suddenly there you were. These strange, wonderful beings with 4 arms and ancient wisdom, and you did not attack us. You welcomed us. You offered friendship. She turned to face him. That meant everything to us, Ambassador. You were the first to see us as more than primitives, the first to offer alliance instead of conquest. My grandfather said it was the most important moment in human history. He said we must never forget it. We must never betray that trust. But he is gone now, said Crixtal, as is Sarah Chen, as are all the people who signed that treaty. Why should their promises bind you? Rodriguez smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. Because they are us, Ambassador. They are our ancestors, our history, our soul. What they promised, we promise. What they believed, we believe. That is what it means to be human. We carry our past with us always, and we honor it. The Eternal Promise began its descent toward Cathari Prime. Below them, a conquered world waited. A broken empire prepared to submit. A new era in galactic politics was about to begin. And Crixtal, for the first time in 400 years, felt something he had almost forgotten was possible. Hope. The surrender ceremony took place in the Great Hall of the Cathari Dominion, a vast chamber carved from black stone and decorated with the skulls of conquered enemies. The Cathari were a proud people, fierce warriors who had built their empire through conquest and fear. For 300 years, they had dominated this sector of the galaxy. No one had dared challenge them. Until now. Crixtal stood beside Admiral Rodriguez as the Cathari Supreme Commander entered the hall. His name was Vargath, and he was the most feared military leader his species had produced in generations. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his gray skin covered in battle scars, his 4 yellow eyes fixed on the humans before him. He looked defeated. More than that, he looked confused. I do not understand, Vargath said. His voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. Your species is young, weak. You have held space for barely 2 centuries. How did you destroy my fleet? Admiral Rodriguez did not seem intimidated by his size or his reputation. She stood straight and met his gaze without flinching. We are not weak, she said simply. You made a mistake, Commander. You saw our short lives and assumed we were inferior. But our short lives make us value every moment. They make us work harder, move faster, think smarter. While your species was resting on old glories, we were innovating, adapting, preparing. Preparing for what? For anything, everything. We learned long ago that the universe is dangerous, that peace is precious and rare, that we must be ready to defend what we love at any moment. Rodriguez stepped closer to the towering alien. You attacked our friends. You thought there would be no consequences. You were wrong. Vargoth's eyes shifted to Crystal. And you, the Velthari, you hide behind these humans like frightened children. Before Crystal could respond, Rodriguez spoke again. Her voice had turned to ice. Do not speak to our ally that way. The Velthari are a peaceful people. They chose diplomacy over war. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. And now they have us to protect them. You should remember that. The Cathari commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. Protect them? For how long? Your lives are brief as sparks. In 100 years you will all be dead. Who will protect them then? Our children, said Rodriguez. And their children after them, and their children after that. Generation after generation forever. That is how humanity works, Commander. We do not break our promises just because the people who made them are gone. We honor them. We remember them. And we keep faith with those who trust us. Impossible, said Vargoth. Nothing lasts forever. Rodriguez smiled. It was not a kind smile. Watch us. The surrender documents were signed. The Cathari Dominion agreed to all terms. Their great empire, 300 years in the making, had been humbled in a single day by a species they had considered barely civilized. As they left the Great Hall, Crystal walked beside Admiral Rodriguez in silence. The human woman looked tired but satisfied. She had done what she came to do. Admiral, said Crystal, what happens now? Now we go home, she said. We rebuild our fleet, we bury our dead, and we prepare for the next threat, because there is always a next threat. You lost 17 ships today. Thousands of your people died. Does that not trouble you? Rodriguez stopped walking. When she turned to face him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Every death troubles me, Ambassador, every single one. I will carry their names with me for the rest of my life. But they knew what they were fighting for. They believed in it. They died so that your people could live, so that the alliance we built 50 years ago could survive. That means something. It has to mean something. Crystal was quiet for a moment. Then he did something he had never done before. He extended one of his primary hands and grasped the Admiral's hand in the human gesture of friendship. It means everything, he said. I will not forget this. My people will not forget this. You have taught us something today that we should have understood long ago. What is that? That there is a difference between allies and friends. Allies help you when it benefits them. Friends help you because they care. Humanity is not our ally, Admiral Rodriguez. You are our friends, and we are yours, forever. The Admiral squeezed his hand. A single tear ran down her cheek. Forever, she agreed. News of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species with access to faster-than-light communication learned what had happened. The mighty Cathari Dominion, terror of 300 years, had been crushed by the young, upstart humans. The impossible had happened. But that was not what caught the attention of galactic observers. What caught their attention was why it had happened. The humans had not fought for territory. They had not fought for resources or power or glory. They had fought for a treaty signed 50 years ago with a species they barely knew. They had crossed half the galaxy and gone to war because their friends were in trouble. That was unprecedented. That was unheard of. That changed everything. Within weeks, requests for alliance treaties began flooding into Earth. Species who had previously ignored humanity suddenly wanted to be their friends. Some were sincere. Most were not. They saw the human military power and wanted it for themselves. They imagined using human soldiers to fight their own wars, settle their own grudges, expand their own empires. The Terran Senate rejected almost all of them. We do not sell our loyalty, explained the human ambassador to a delegation from the Vorax Confederacy. When we make an alliance, we mean it. We will die for our allies. We will fight for them. We will sacrifice everything for them. But that means we cannot give such a promise lightly. We must know you are worthy of it. Worthy? The Vorax ambassador was offended. We are a great power. We control 40 systems. We have. You have used your power to oppress weaker species, interrupted the human. You have broken treaties when convenient. You have betrayed allies when it suited your interests. That is not who we choose to stand beside. The Vorax delegation left empty-handed. Over the following years, humanity made only 3 new alliance treaties. The first was with the Minthara Collective, a peaceful federation of small species who had banded together for mutual protection. They had nothing to offer humanity except friendship and trust. That was enough. The second was with the Broken Chain, a group of former slave species who had won their freedom through rebellion and courage. They were poor and weak by galactic standards, but they had proven they understood the value of liberty and sacrifice. The third was with an ancient species called the Keepers of Memory. They were dying out, their civilization fading into history. They had no military, no resources, nothing of material value, but they had knowledge. Millions of years of history and wisdom preserved in their vast libraries, and they had chosen to share it with humanity because, they said, humans were the only species who understood what memory meant. You do not forget, the eldest keeper had said. You carry your past with you and learn from it. You honor your ancestors and keep faith with your descendants. You are like us. That is why we trust you. The treaty with the keepers was signed in a small ceremony on their homeworld. No cameras, no grand speeches, just a simple exchange of promises between old friends. And like all human promises, it would be kept forever. 100 years passed. Still lived. The Velthari were a long-lived species, and though he had aged, he remained strong and vital. He had retired from diplomatic service decades ago, but he still kept watch over the galaxy's affairs. He watched as humanity grew, not just in power but in wisdom. The young species that had stumbled into space 2 centuries ago had become something remarkable. They had built colonies on 1,000 worlds. They had pushed the boundaries of science and technology. They had made friends across the galaxy. And they had kept every promise they had ever made. The alliance with the Velthari had grown stronger with each passing decade. Human and Velthari scientists worked together. Human and Velthari merchants traded freely. Human and Velthari children grew up learning each other's languages and cultures. It was a friendship built to last forever, and it had. Crystal was sitting in his garden when the message arrived. A human ship was approaching Velthar, carrying a diplomatic delegation. They requested permission to visit him personally. He granted it, curious about what they might want. The shuttle landed in a clearing near his home. A human woman stepped out. She was young by his standards, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair and bright eyes. She walked toward him with a confident stride. "Ambassador Crystal," she said, "my name is Maya Rodriguez. I believe you knew my great-great-great-grandmother." Felt his heart skip. Rodriguez. The name brought back memories of fire and fury, of ships burning in the darkness, of a tired old woman with tears in her eyes. "Admiral Rodriguez," he said. "Yes, I knew her. She was remarkable." Maya smiled. It was the same smile her ancestor had worn a century ago. "She left something for you, in her will. She said you would understand what it meant." The young woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small object. It was a piece of metal, tarnished with age, stamped with words in human script. Crystal took it carefully. He could read human writing. The words said, "Eternal Promise." "It is a piece of her ship," said Maya. "The flagship she commanded at the Battle of Kethari Prime. She kept it for the rest of her life. She said it reminded her of the day humanity proved what friendship meant. She wanted you to have it when she was gone." Crystal held the fragment in his hands. It was small, insignificant, worth nothing by any material measure. But it was priceless. "She remembered," he said softly, "after all these years." "She never forgot," said Maya, "and neither did we. I grew up hearing stories about you, Ambassador, about the day you stood on her bridge and watched humanity fight for its friends. She said you understood us. She said you saw who we really are." "I did," said Crystal. "I saw creatures who kept their promises, who honored their word, who loved their friends with a fierceness that nothing could break. I had never seen anything like it. I still have not." Maya sat down beside him. The garden was quiet. Birds sang in the trees. A gentle breeze stirred the flowers. "Ambassador, I came here for another reason, not just to deliver my grandmother's gift." "What reason?" "The Keepers of Memory are holding a gathering, a celebration of the alliance treaties humanity has signed over the past century. They want to honor the species who trusted us first, the Velthari. They want you to be there." Crystal was surprised. "Me? I am old, retired. I have not been involved in diplomacy for decades." "You are a legend," said Maya simply. "You were there at the beginning. You saw what we could become before anyone else did. The Keepers say that makes you important. They say memory matters." Crystal looked at the piece of metal in his hands. The eternal promise. A ship that had crossed half the galaxy to save his people. A promise that had been kept for 100 years. "When is the gathering?" he asked. "Next month. I can arrange transport if you are willing to come." Crystal stood slowly. His old body ached, but his spirit felt young, younger than it had in decades. "I will come," he said. "I would be honored." The gathering took place on the Keeper homeworld, in a great hall filled with representatives from every species humanity had befriended. The Velthari were there, the Minthara Collective, the Broken Chain, dozens of others, species who had trusted humanity and been rewarded with loyalty that never wavered. Crystal was given a place of honor at the front of the hall. Maya Rodriguez sat beside him, representing her family's long tradition of service. The eldest Keeper rose to speak. He was ancient beyond imagining, his body frail, his voice barely a whisper, but his words carried across the hall like thunder. "We are here," he said, to remember promises made and promises kept, to remember trust given and trust honored, to remember what it means to have friends in this cold and dangerous universe." He turned to look at the human delegation. 200 years ago, a young species came to the stars. They were small and weak and alone. They had every reason to be afraid, every reason to doubt, every reason to abandon their principles and become like the empires that surrounded them. The old Keeper's eyes gleamed. "They did not. They made promises. They kept them. They found friends. They protected them. They built something that no one had ever built before, a network of trust and loyalty that spans the galaxy, a family of species bound together not by fear or greed but by love." The hall was silent. Every being present felt the weight of the moment. "Humanity has taught us something precious," said the Keeper. "They have taught us that friendship can last forever, that promises do not die with the people who make them, that there is a power in loyalty greater than any weapon, any fleet, any empire." He raised one withered hand toward the human delegation. "For 200 years you have kept faith with us. For 200 years you have honored your word. For 200 years you have proven that when Terran Diplomats offer alliance, they mean it for eternity, not years. And for that we thank you, we honor you, and we pledge ourselves to you forever." The hall erupted in applause. Representatives from dozens of species rose to their feet, cheering and calling out in languages from across the galaxy. The sound was like a wave, washing over everything. Felt tears running down his face. He had lived for 500 years. He had seen wonders and horrors beyond imagination, but he had never seen anything as beautiful as this. Maya Rodriguez took his hand. Her eyes were wet too. "My grandmother was right," she said. "You do understand us." "I do," said Crystal, "and I always will." Outside the great hall, the stars burned bright. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the space lanes, protecting their friends. Somewhere out there, the descendants of Sarah Chen and Admiral Rodriguez lived and worked and loved. Somewhere out there, the alliance treaties signed centuries ago were still being honored. Because that was what humanity did. They kept their promises. They remembered their friends. They loved fiercely and loyally and forever. And the galaxy was better for it. Crystal looked up at the stars and smiled. 500 years of life, countless species encountered, endless diplomatic games played. And in all that time, he had never found anything more valuable than this. True friends. Forever.